thank you very much and welcome. Is that actually working? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Because when I clap on it, nothing happens. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for coming on such a wonderful day. But it's very cold outside, it's very warm here. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview of what happens right now in planetary exploration. And many of the missions which are going out into our solar system, then we have really a possibility to also to look for life. And I'm just starting you up with these incredible busy slides, and I hope that the people, I'm not standing in the way of some people, otherwise probably try to find a way to see it, or I move around. But this is a very busy slide, but it should show you that right now, you know, there are so many missions going out into our solar system in order to investigate and explore planets, our moon, and even in the outer solar system. And obviously we're also looking at exoplanets beyond our solar system. And so I just wanted to show you how busy it is, and you certainly know very well that there are a lot of activities going to the moon. Really international consortia, the Artemis program of NASA, and also the program International Lunar Research Station. I will come back to that, which is Chinese-Russian. Is trying to make a base on the moon in the next 10 years, and then also bring astronauts back, cosmonauts, taikonauts back to the surface of the moon. We have a lot of asteroid sample return missions, actually three very successful missions, and more to come. I will go into detail in all of that. I just wanted to show you the big overview. You know that we have the International Space Station in orbit right now, but it has an end of lifetime, namely 2030. And then we will have to have different space stations. We have right now the Chinese space station, which is working for the next 15 years, but we think that we will have commercial space stations in the future by 2030 in orbit in order to do research and also bring society eventually into space in the future. Mars is another really, really important topic. There are many missions right now on Mars. I will go back to that. We are dreaming since decades for a Mars sample return mission, that we are bringing back samples, you know, to Earth so that we can analyze them in the laboratories on Earth. And there is also human exploration of Mars. When you listen to Elon Musk, we will be there tomorrow. I will tell you that it's not going to be the case, but I will explain you that a little bit. And then the outer solar system, very, very interesting. And maybe you know all very much about Mars and the moon, but not so much about the outer solar system. And it's very, very interesting because we have hundreds of moons of the large planets in the outer solar system. Jupiter has, I think, 98 moons. Saturn has over 150 moons. And every time when we visit one of those moons, you know, there is credible new knowledge and very, very interesting things. And also, we are going beyond our solar system in order to look for exoplanets and looking what are the conditions on those kind of exoplanets. So this is a little bit what I want to cover in 50 minutes, or now 45. So you can imagine it's going through rather fast. But I'm trying to give you the newest results, and of course also what we do and how far we are with looking for life beyond Earth. So this is a very, very snapshot of how a solar system formed, namely through an interstellar cloud full of gas and dust, very, very tiny dust particles. You can see that they are micron, they grow to centimeters, meters, and form planets. And later on, the big gas of this cloud dissipates. So this is how our our Earth actually is formed. Of course, this is very, very fast, and obviously this takes a long time. But all this actually happened 4.6 billion years ago. Our solar system is 4.6 billion years old, and so is our Earth. And this is our current solar system. Our host star, the Sun, which is at the moment very, very active, as some of you certainly know, which are interested astronomers. We are in a solar maximum right now. And then we have Mercury, Venus, and the Earth. You see already in this nice little picture that the Earth is in a special zone in our solar system. Then we have Mars and our neighbor planet, which you can see it is a little bit smaller, and I will come back to that. That's important. So it could not develop like the Earth. We have Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And Pluto, when I studied, it was still a planet, but it is at the moment it is a dwarf planet, but still very interesting and has been visited. So when you look at the small insert here, a picture, it shows you that the Earth is in a very, very, very special place we call the habitable zone. An environment where you can keep liquid water on the surface, where you we are protected through our atmosphere from strong UV radiation. This is not the case for Mars. We are also protected by a magnetic field and a lot of internal structure and dynamism in the Earth from galactic cosmic rays, which are really lethal to organisms and to humans. And so we are really in a very, very nice place, which we call the habitable zones. That's also what we are looking in exoplanets. Or how the habitable zone looks there, and what planets are in this habitable zone outside our solar system. But we see, and that's something what I wanted to show you also in particular today, we see that in the outer solar system, in the moons, we have spectacular moons in the outer solar system which have special conditions. And we cannot exclude that primitive life has been formed on those kind of moons. And I will show you them. So we have to keep an open mind. It's not only this line which defines, where life actually can form. And so this is more or less our solar system, and there are so many missions which are going, and I will try to go through them. There are many missions going to Venus right now. We have a lot of missions on Mars, and there are a lot of missions going into the outer solar system, and I will try to go through the most recent results of those kind of missions. And then I would like to show you a little bit what we know about the origin of life. And it's a little bit disappointing because we still don't know so much about the origin of life on Earth. And we had, as we said, 4.6 billion years ago. This is when our Earth, more or less, was formed. And the first 500 million years, from 4.6 to 4, have been a very unpleasant period because the whole solar system needed to stabilize itself. And we had more or less, this is of course an artist picture, but we also call it the Hayden, after the Greek, the hell, because it was very, very dynamic. We had a lot of geological processes, volcanisms. We had a lot of swirling smaller planets, we call them planetesimals, which actually impacted, on the forming planets. And it was a very unpleasant time where it is very difficult to create life. Maybe in certain regions, but it would probably be wiped out again. And we needed somehow some stability, which only occurred approximately at 3.8 billion years ago. And exactly there, we already find traces of life. And obviously, these were very primitive microbes. We call them prokaryotes. And they have been living under conditions without oxygen, because at that period of time there has been practically no oxygen in the atmosphere. You know, by now we have about 21% of oxygen. This is why we live and breathe. At that time there was practically no oxygen, and so we call them anaerobic, or they lived without oxygen. So today, when we look at the Earth today, life is everywhere. Wherever you look, and I have some pictures later on, if we go in the desert, if we go in the Yellowstone Park, if we look very high in the atmosphere, if we go to Antarctica, we do find microbes. Life has adapted everywhere on Earth, and it's like an imperative. But at the beginning, how it actually started is much more difficult to look at. And some of the ideas go back to hydrothermal vents, some energetic places of volcanism in the ocean, where you have a lot of heat, where you have a lot of dynamic going on, where eventually processes could form, chemical processes could form. But we don't know exactly where life originated. I will come back to that a little bit later. When we look at Mars, Mars had the same condition, as the early Earth, just at the very beginning. But it is a much smaller planet and developed completely differently. And we are thinking that there could have been a period very early on Mars where you actually could have the same conditions to form life like on Earth. And then, of course, we look at the outer solar system. So what we actually know, the sources, of the origin of life, they have been partly formed on the Earth itself, but they have been partly transported via small bodies, comets, asteroids, meteorites, micrometeorites, to the Earth. And we will come back to that when we talk about asteroids. And they could have brought material, water and organic molecules, so the raw material for life in this period, which could have been used to build up life under the Earth's conditions. So I want to tell you that the biologists and geologists are quarreling much more than astronomers. That's what I've realized in my career. And so the exact date, if it's now 3.8 or 4 or 3.5 billion years ago, there are a lot of discussions and there are a lot of different papers. But as a consensus, everybody believes that 1 billion years after life or Earth originated, there has been primitive life on Earth. So there are even now papers that it already happened at 4 billion years ago already, that you find rocks and you measure isotopic ratios, and you look at very old rocks that you can define biological processes at that age. So this is really something for geochemists and biologists. Biologists can look in those kind of images of old fossils and of old rocks, and they can really define and compare it with Earth observations. So I'm more an astronomer, I have to believe it, but there are many papers out there, and the consensus is definitely 3.5, eventually 3.8 billion years ago there has been primitive life on Earth. And I cannot go into detail in that, but I just want to tell you that there has been such a fantastic evolution. So imagine life has originated 3.8 billion years ago. You have here a very, very different Earth with a haze in the atmosphere. And you have glacial periods, like for instance 600 million years ago. You have the dinosaur area, which is approximately from 250 to 66 million years ago. We're going to discuss why they have suddenly disappeared. We had the last ice age not so long time ago, and then actually humans are on Earth only since a very, very short time scale. This is something what I wanted to explain you, that we had primitive life on the planet for 3.8 billion years ago. But we humans only came really at the very, very, very last moment, and only in this period, and continents changed. And I'm sure you have had some of the lectures of geology. I cannot go into detail, but it's also important to understand, does such an evolution lead to humanity? And would that actually happen in the same way, you know, on another exoplanet or somewhere? So this is also something, a little bit more philosophically questioned. So as I told you, extreme life is found everywhere on Earth. Where you ever go in the deep ocean, you certainly have heard from all those parks where you have a life which is, you know, able to live at ultra high temperatures here at 125 Celsius. Yeah, we have some organisms which still, you know, replicate. Yeah, we are already dissolved in the sauna after 70 degrees. So they have a different, a little bit a different makeup of the genetic material. Yeah, the same components, but a little bit different makeup that they can survive in this region. So life has adapted over those billion years everywhere, and you even find it on Antarctica. That you find organisms, they are very slow, and in particular reproducing very slowly. So I always tell my students, never make a PhD thesis on psychrophiles. These are the cold bacteria, because they only replicate every 2 years. So it's very, very difficult, you know, to get results. But there are a lot of groups of people which are studying extreme life, and we still discover life, for instance, in the 3 kilometers in the basement of our planet, yeah? So in the subsurface, we still discover new organisms every year. So, and then, this is a little bit a summary, the clock of life, the evolution. You can see here, and this is an older plot, this is a new plot. We calculate with approximately 3.8 billion years ago, and then you can see the evolution. Complex life only originated, multicellular life originated in approximately 600 million years ago, and mammals, you know, approximately 150 million years ago. And then look at this whole, I just wanted to tell you, look at this whole clock, where you have actually, you have some indication that the multicellular life was earlier, but most of it actually came only here. And so how long it actually takes, you know, what a long geological period it takes of stability on a planet to build something which is more complex. And this is something I wanted to keep, that you keep in mind. We are here, yeah? We came in the last second when you look at the clock of life. And we should be very, very careful that we are not just a second on that clock. Yeah? That we actually stay longer. And I will come back to that. Now we go through the solar system. I'm not going to go on Mercury, because I have to take a selection in this time. I have Venus is our sister planet, and it has a runaway green effect. It has 500 degrees Celsius on the surface. So it is really, really extremely hot. It has a toxic atmosphere of carbon dioxide, and it has many, many different clouds. You can hardly see actually even the surface. It's very difficult to investigate Venus, because in this kind of temperatures, you know, everybody who knows a bit about electronics, you know, everything just knocks out in this high temperature. You have winds and it actually is not a habitable planet right now. But we think that Venus has had a very different period, a stable period, which had water on the surface. And so eventually, one day, there could have been life, or maybe there are some bacteria which are still possible in the atmosphere. And so that's why many, many space missions, you can see them here from NASA, from ESA, and also from private companies and universities. The Morning Star mission want to go in particular in the cloud deck. you know, of Venus in order to look, and also to look for its evolution. And it's also an important planet because this runaway greenhouse effect, we want to understand it, because we want to understand how our Earth actually develops. Could we actually also have such an evolvement and development? And most of the missions right now are going to Moon and Mars. And so why? Moon is actually a part of Earth. In the very early history of the Earth, the Moon has actually been created through an impactor with the Earth. And you can see here a little bit, you can see that in the back, how that was formed. And so the Moon is a mixture of the impactor and actually of part of Earth. We can see that when we are, because we analyzed moon rocks. And so we want to understand what happened at the very early beginning. When we are going to Moon, the scientists, you know, have a lot of ideas, you know, to understand the early solar system. We also want to see the impact record, because whereas on Earth, everything has actually been eroded. Yeah, you have on the Moon, you can see even the footstep of astronauts. You can actually really see every crater, and you can estimate what actually happened in the early solar system, what we cannot do anymore on Earth. When we go to Mars, we want to understand habitability. We want to search for life on Mars. We want to identify biomarkers. We are bringing instruments there in order to look. And we want to study also in the future, you know, and that's for both environments, you know, what is the lunar environment, what is the Martian environment for bringing astronauts or human exploration into these regions. And so that's why there are so many missions which are going. And when you can see at the moment, right now there's a very, very busy program. It's the Artemis program from NASA in cooperation with European countries, with Japan, with other countries, the United Emirates. And so there's a lot of possibilities to have a long-term, you know, stay and evolution. Whole, how do you say it? They call it also the Artemis generation, to have a sustainable presence on the Moon, building habitats, having rovers, and bringing astronauts back to the Moon. Big program, costs a lot of money. At the moment, we don't know how it develops, because in the US, you see there are quite some changes, and so we will see how much money goes into that. The next one is the Russian and Chinese program, which has attracted a lot of other countries which work with them. And it's called the International Lunar Research Station, and they have more or less the same in mind. So it's not a catastrophic competition, you know, but it is, how to say, there are two different programs, and hopefully when they are both developing, that they will cooperate, because it's very, very difficult to build those kind of lunar bases. But these are big ideas. Also, India, for instance, is interested in a human space exploration program. And these are the recent pictures, because we do have not only space agencies, which are going actually to the surface, we have also commercial actors which are going now, for instance, to the Moon. And this is a Firefly, which just landed successfully on the Moon, and has some kind of experiments, and there's, you can see that in the press everywhere. They are just right now quite active, and there has been another lander which just landed, but not in a good position this week. So to be very honest, there are 155 missions to the Moon planned until 2034. 150. They will not all go there, but can you imagine? I mean, we have hardly been at the Moon in the last 20 years, and now there are 155 missions planned in the next 10 years. I think I have a picture at the end which can show you that. It's quite amazing. Coming to Mars, I told you, you know, Mars could have been very, very similar to the early Earth. Unfortunately, today, Mars looks very deserted, and the surface is actually very, very hard, would be unpleasant for life. Life could not survive because of the toxic atmosphere, the dryness, the UV radiation, which is penetrating, the galactic cosmic radiation, which is actually penetrating deeper, kilometers down there. So right now, Mars is not habitable, but we are looking for niches. And I want to show you, let me see things. I was a bit surprised by this video by myself. I just wanted to look at it. This is a video from the high resolution camera from Germany, from DLR on the ESA Mars Express mission, and it shows you a little bit how Mars is looking like. I'm sorry for the titles; they are in German, but you will be able to read that. Yeah, and just look at it a little bit. And I don't disturb. You have volcanoes on Mars, which are 25 kilometers high. You have craters. You have valleys. This is a crater filled with ice. So it's a really fantastic environment, Mars, and we have observed it with many different missions very well. And obviously there has been a search for water for a long time. And you see, for instance, these are minerals where we can estimate that there has been water on the surface. You see ice traces, you see structures, you know, on Mars, which could only have been formed in standing bodies of water. So many of the rovers, in particular from the US, have investigated Mars and certainly have found a lot of water ice and ideas that water actually has been on the surface but is now underground. And we have also confirmed, you know, organic molecules, simple organic molecules, not life, but hydrocarbons. So if they come from biological processes or come from meteorites or asteroids, we don't know. But Mars is very, very well studied. And right now, we have Mars 2020 with the Perseverance rover on the surface, and also not anymore active, but was active for a long time. Its helper, a little 1.8 kilometer helicopter drone, Ingenuity, which actually really helped, you know, the rover where to go, you know. And this is for the first time that you actually test technology on a planet which is completely different in the atmospheric composition, in the pressure. And so you really test continuously new technology when you go out in the solar system. And you see the Jezero crater where actually this mission has landed. We believe that 3.5 billion years ago there has been water, liquid water there, and then this is a dry lake bed. You can see here the whole delta, and this is actually where the rover Perseverance is actually taking samples like those here, and they are actually put into titanium tubes. Yeah, they are approximately this size, and it's not only soil, also atmospheric composition is actually included. And right now, I think there have been 30 sample tubes which have been filled, and they should be brought back to Earth. It is a part of a Mars sample return mission, and please forget this because this is all under review. But you know, how do you bring back samples? It's very complicated. You actually have to bring an orbiter, you have to bring eventually a lander, you have to bring a vehicle which is actually bringing the samples back into orbit, and then you have an orbiter which meets and brings back the sample to Earth and actually throws a capsule back to Earth. It's a very complicated, very expensive process. It is in discussion since decades, and we hope that it happens one day, because that's a possibility to take material in our laboratories and study them with high resolution. If you go you are always limited, you know, in what you can actually investigate, and that would be really perfect. So that is currently also under review in the US project, but the samples have been collected, yeah, and they are collected every day, you know, on Mars right now. And the next step, of course, is, you know, do we go to Mars with humans? And as we are now just preparing, you know, to go back to Mars, to the moon, it will still take quite some time. Because from the human point of view, from the health point of view, we are not yet ready. Also not if you hear in the newspaper that we are going there in 2028. It's a long travel to go there, and we need to protect ourselves, particularly from radiation. A lot of the experiments, you know, in order to prepare for human exploration in the future, are done on the International Space Station, and are still done on the International Station until 2030. That's why, you know, a structure in low Earth orbit where you can study microgravity and particular conditions is so important. There are more than 3,000 experiments which have been done on the International Space Station in the last 20 years with scientists from over 100 countries. So they study in particular astronaut health. When you go into space, you actually break down your muscles. You have bone loss. You certainly have read that already, how astronauts are actually checked. You have cardiovascular problems. You have a weak immune system, and actually microbes which you bring with, they're getting more virulent. So it's a very unpleasant system here. You have new systems, for instance, with vision, because you are pressing more or less the fluids up, you know, in the brain that you are not seeing very well. I don't want to tell you exactly all the complicated names, but just in simple terms, you know, obviously you have a high pressure, and that reacts with the eyes, and you are blurring, and that was already observed with a lot of astronauts on the space station. So going to a long travel to Mars, that can be much worse. You have an increased cancer risk due to radiation, and as you know now, right now, astronauts, they have a limit. They can receive, and we call it 1 Sievert, yeah, per lifetime doses, yeah. But the recent results from going to Mars and investigating the environment, you will get already 60% of that radiation on a travel forth and back to Mars, not calculated how long you stay. So then there are a lot. Galactic cosmic rays are really difficult. If you have solar flares, it is even more dangerous, and we cannot predict them. You are in changing gravity field. Astronauts are confined, so they have psychological problems. So there's so much going on, and you have really to be sure that people are healthy when they are going on their travel. And one of the most difficult things is the radiation, and we have to find better materials, better protection before we actually really go there, and we have to do more medical research for humans that they can really, you know, stay for a few weeks on Mars. So I'm going to the outer solar system now because I have a limited time, and there are several, you know, interesting. We call them the ocean worlds in the solar system. Very interesting moons. So you see here Earth and Mars, but we have also other objects. And for instance, Enceladus, Europa is one of the largest moons of Jupiter. I will come into detail in that. It has very likely a deep ocean of approximately 100 kilometers under a 10-kilometer ice cap inside. Then we have Ganymede, very likely with an ocean, which is also a moon of Jupiter. And we have Enceladus, which is a very interesting object because it spies more or less in geysers water and other ice into the solar system, and we can actually, go through the plumes and look at that. It's a small object. I will look at the. But as I told you, there are hundreds of moons in the outer solar system, and we know only a few by space missions. So there's so much to discover. There's so much, to look out. Every space mission brings us fantastic new knowledge and also technical new knowledge. So let's go to Europa, because obviously also the name is interesting. So Europa is one of the largest moons of one of the Galilean moons. You can see them easily with a telescope here when you come. Of Jupiter. And it has like an ice skating place on the surface. Yeah? And what actually happens is that there is a big ocean under the 10-kilometer ice. You have approximately, this is 10-kilometer ice, and then you have 100 kilometer, I hope you can see that here, 100 kilometer of liquid, which is kept liquid through the interaction with Jupiter. You have chemical processes and tidal interactions, and you have energy where you actually can create a liquid ocean. And what happens is that partly it breaks through the ice and refreezes. And that's why it's looking like a skating place, And we also know from observations that the oceans here in Europa are quite salty, and that might also, contribute, to this environment. So it has also been said that this is a real habitat, because obviously there's a lot of liquid water and a lot of people would like to know. So there are several missions which are on the way. One of them is the Europa Clipper mission, which has been launched just recently, a few months ago. It's from NASA. And there's also the European JUICE mission, which is going to the outer solar system. And they are trying to investigate for a future landing of a Europa lander. In order to investigate the ice and see if there are any kind of organic material, if there are brines, these are is liquid water which is within the ice, we call that, and if there are eventually some primitive organisms living there. And then we have Titan, which is one of the largest moons of Saturn, and that has been visited by a NASA ESA mission. And just don't look down there now, I think it's a loop. But for the first time, a mission in 2007 has actually looked and has found that this moon has continents, lakes, dunes, mountains, rivers. But it's not water, because we are here at such a low temperature. We are at, I think, minus 180 degrees Celsius, 94 Kelvin, somebody makes a calculation if I made a mistake, So it's very, very cold, and so liquid water cannot be liquid at this kind of cold temperature, so it is ethane and methane, so practically alcohols or something like that, which are actually making up the lakes and the rivers, on this kind of environment in the outer solar system. So I'm just going back because there's a new mission which is going to fly there. It's called Dragonfly in 2028, and it's an octocopter. It's again a drone, a huge drone. Everybody's very fond of drones now, also for planetary science, and it should just hop over the surface, and take samples and send back in situ data. And everybody's very excited about this mission, and they hope that it will be able to hop, I think, 8 or 10 times, and bring data. So already visited, it has a very dense haze, Titan, so you cannot see what's on the surface. So this mission, Cassini-Huygens, from ESA and NASA, has really revealed a new world in the outer solar system, and now very likely we are going back. And the last object I want to discuss is Saturn's moon Enceladus, which is this moon which has, we call it cryovolcanism. So it spies out ice and icy particles you know, into the, in 100 kilometers, you know, out. And you can see it has some active regions here on this moving thing, and there are many missions planned, because actually landing, you know, on the outer solar system on such an object is so difficult. It's a small moon. I've said this is a small moon compared to Europa and Titan. It is only 500 kilometers in diameter. And there are a lot of missions planned right now to go to Enceladus in order to fly through the plumes and sample and send back the data to understand what is on. We also think there is an ocean. We have seen very complex organic molecules spied out already by previous missions, but now, of course, there's much higher resolution, and we want to go back there. So every space agency in the US and Europe is actually preparing a mission. So before the end, I still want to go to the small bodies of the solar system. As you know, you have seen a little bit how, in a 1 minute file, how a solar system forms. And you have a lot of material, little dust particles which grow to planets. But you have a lot of material which is left over. And the so-called remnants, you know, planetesimals which did not form planets, they are actually contributing to the population we call the small bodies. For comets, asteroids, and their fragments. Yeah, so comets and asteroids have fragments, and we call them meteorites. And as you know, meteorites are the ones which fall on Earth. We can collect them and we can analyze them. Not to mix up with meteors, because meteors are actually disrupted in the atmosphere. They burn up in the atmosphere. You see them glow, and you can also make observations and get good results from it. But those materials, they actually really fall on Earth. They can also fall in your garden. It happened. I remember that, even in Holland. They can be brought into the laboratory and analyzed. Yeah? And so, at the very beginning of our solar system, the first 500 million years, we had an enormous amount of impacts of all this material which was not incorporated into comets. And it has been somehow later on trapped through when the solar system stabilized itself. We have an asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars, and Jupiter has such big gravitational forces that they are formed, you know, in an asteroid belt. We have the Kuiper belt, which is at the edge of our solar system, where we have also a lot of our small bodies served. And so at the very beginning of our Earth, they were actually impacting the forming planets, asteroids and comets. And we know from analysis of meteorites that we find very interesting molecules in meteorites. Yeah? As you know, we are built up of 21 amino acids in our life. In some of the meteorites, we find over 80 amino acids. They are very similar. They are like isomers, as we call them in chemistry. But just that you know, we find all organic molecules, you know, which we actually need, you know, for building up life. We find in meteorites. This is not life. These are raw material. Yeah? And there are chemical processes which happen in the interstellar clouds. There are chemical processes which happen in the solar system, which do form, you know, biomolecules as well. And so everything what you actually need, you can find in meteorites. And so what we think is that one source, not everything, but one source of material to bring raw material on Earth came through comets and meteorites. They brought water, they brought organic molecules, and they helped, you know, bringing raw material so that life could develop. And that's why we really, really want to study them. This is the Rosetta mission from ESA, which was the only mission which actually landed on a comet surface. And it also observed it from far. The object was looking very, very difficult. From far, it was like a very nice round object. When you came close, it looked like a potato. Very difficult to land on. And so this was the mission, Rosetta mission. which had, this is the orbiter, had a small lander, which actually tried to land on the surface, and called Philae. And Philae, it's like a washing machine, yeah? It's about one, yeah? Thing, and was made out of carbon fiber, so really ultra light, you know, and had a primary battery, and it had solar panels. They actually did not make it because first I want to show you the images, you know, when a comet comes every 6 years, you know, into the solar system, and you have this wonderful way to follow the comet. When it comes into the solar system, it starts to evaporate, because comets are mostly made of ice, water ice, and you see, you know, how it more or less loses the ice, when it comes to the sun and leaves the solar system again. But the little lander here, you see, it actually landed. It's very difficult to land on such an object because the gravitational forces are tiny, very, very low, 1/100th, you know, of compared to what we have here on Earth. So it hops, and that's what actually happened. You know, it touched down because it has sensors, you know, a lander. And everybody said, oh, wonderful, it made it. But before they could even think of it, was again in the air. Yeah? And it hopped several times, and then it got caught in a crater. And because one leg was not on the ground, but like this, it could not deploy the solar panel things. But still, it made 3 days of measurements with the primary batteries and found a lot of organic material. So we know now that comets do have a lot of biomolecules. We know that from meteorites, which are fragments, and we also know that now from asteroids. And you know that asteroids, you hear that in many different contexts, also in planetary defense. So what we want to understand is really, we want to know the formation of asteroids, the properties, and we also want to know their composition. There are several missions, and I only want to show you one, which actually brought back samples, you know, from an asteroid. And we also want to understand how those asteroids are built, this near-Earth asteroid build, which can come and impact on the Earth. Many of the objects, obviously the outer asteroid belt will never be dangerous for the Earth, but the near-Earth asteroids, because they cross Earth's orbit, they can be dangerous, and they can really do harm. This is 2013, you know, Chelyabinsk, as you know, an object only of 17 meters, you know, which actually imploded in the atmosphere and made a real big crisis. 1,000 people were about injured because of the very strong you know, energy which frees when this implodes in the atmosphere. It did not really reach the surface, only a few pieces, but to understand, even it happened very likely in the past, you know, like we have in Siberia, we have a huge area where we have deforestation, and there's no other explanation than an impact in 1908. But at that time, of course, you know, nobody could really record that. So now we can do that. So that's why we want to study it. And this is the Hayabusa mission from the Japanese Space Agency, Hayabusa 2. It actually selected an asteroid, it's called Ryugu, and it observed it over quite some time with its orbiter from 20 kilometers, looked where it could actually take samples, and then it actually came close to the body, and it actually dropped a few small landers in order to investigate the surface. Yeah? You see here one of the landers from the German Space Agency, the Muscat lander. It just drops, and it has instruments on board, and because the gravity is so low, it actually can hop. You know, this little lander, you know, with a robotic arm, it hops over and takes measurements on different places. And it has taken measurements and said that it is extremely porous environment on this asteroid. So if that asteroid would actually come close to Earth, it would not harm us because it would burn up in the atmosphere. And this is something what we want to know. Yeah, and I think then it actually took its samples and actually brought the samples back to Earth. And they have been analyzed in the laboratory, many big science papers, so it brought it back. The analysis showed a lot of organic molecules which are relevant for life. And amino acids, heterocycles, which are in our genetic material, amino acids we need for proteins, to build up proteins in our body. So really interesting in the same result, more or less, similar result with the American mission OSIRIS-REx, which dropped recently in 2023. Brought the samples. The first results have been shown last year, so these are just very, very new results from the asteroid Bennu. Looks quite similar. And also here you can see precursor molecules for life, amino acids, nucleobases. All nucleobases which are in our genetic material can be found there. So we want to understand, how much they actually brought to us, but also we want to understand how dangerous they are. And I cannot go through this list, but we know very well what actually happens, when an object impacts. And I just want to show you, because it was a lot in the press here, Apophis is the next asteroid, which actually reaches the Earth on the 13th of April in 2029 in a distance of 31,000 kilometers. So that's pretty close, yeah? And it is not dangerous, but there are a lot of missions now to go there in order to study to study the object. And we have always to be aware, there are a lot of programs that nothing happens. So I'm nearly finished. I just wanted to finish with exoplanets, yeah. And there are right now more than 7,000 exoplanets, yeah, which have been identified. Not all of them are confirmed yet. Many of them are multiple planetary systems like ours. You know that there has been a Nobel Prize given in 2019, and it is really, really a booming field where a lot of astronomers actually are activated. Also here in Leiden University, we have a lot of scientists working on exoplanets. It's a really important way in order to find, at the planet B, yeah? Somehow an Earth-like planet. So it's really, really important when you look at all these large classes now of exoplanets to do comparative habitability, to understand, why those molecules, why those, in what distance, the planets are, and in what kind of position, what kind of atmospheric compositions they have. So we have a lot of space missions actually looking at exoplanets. And what we actually really have to know is this, what I have told you from the beginning of Earth, is habitability sustained over long geological timescales. We come back to this 3.5 billion years ago, primitive life. We have only since a few 10,000 years, really more or less humans on the planet, and this kind of thing we have to study in exoplanets. As there is a recent paper which says that the upper values for the origin of life is about several 100 million years, for the first appearance, and so we have somehow to scale, everything what we know about exoplanets in the future. But when we look at our own planet, yeah, and this is my last slide, we are really, really somehow special. Yeah? And with this I want to end, and I will actually end fully at 3. So we are in the right distance of the Sun. We have a Jupiter type, like neighbor, which is actually really bringing stability into our solar system, and stability to the orbits of the other planets. We have the right planetary mass. We have plate tectonics, you know. We are the only planet, Earth, which has this kind of plate tectonics in the solar system. We have some other ways of volcanism, but we have a one plate tectonics, but this plate tectonics which we have with subduction brings an exchange between the interior and the atmosphere of the Earth. And we do think that this contributed a lot to the origin of life on Earth. And we have an ocean, we have a good temperature, we are just from we have an atmosphere, we have a magnetic field. So right now I want just to finish, the Earth is a really special planet. There is no planet B right now. And we are also continuing to study our planet, you know. But I just hope I could give you a little bit of glance of what actually happens in planetary exploration and how far we are. And I'm really happy. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions. I hope I can answer them all. Thank you very much.
So thank you again, Pascale, for a really interesting talk. There's for sure a lot to get excited about and to explore in the future as well. So if there are any questions for Pascale, please feel free. Yes.
Well, I actually have two questions. First, you mentioned the planet Venus had a runaway greenhouse effect. What are the theories on how that happened? And the second question is, you mentioned there will be a mission to Europe, the moon, and investigate what's there, maybe on organic life. Isn't there a risk you will contaminate that life? So those are my two questions.
Yeah. So there are two questions. The first one was the runaway greenhouse effect on Venus. So very likely something happened approximately 800 million years ago, and it had something to do with volcanism. Yeah. So there are several theories, and they are not 100% confirmed. But it's something which happened, which completely changed the climate on Venus. Yeah? And what we very likely before that, there was a long period. So these are, how to say, there are papers in this direction and in that direction, but the exact reason is not, but I've heard that a volcanic event was the most thing triggering it. Concerning Europa, these are just observations right now, but you're completely right, and I cannot go in this topic. There's a whole topic of planetary protection. And there are rules, there are soft laws, yeah? These are the COSPA planetary protection rules of the Committee on Space Research, which are adhered to since the 1960s. And all NASA, ESA, Japan, even China, everybody adheres to those rules. And they are in categories, you know. Do you have an orbiter? Do you have a lander? They are most strictest when you go, for instance, to Mars, and you go into a region which is close to water, for instance. Yeah. So we are prepared, but you are completely right. Now we have a lot of commercial actors, and not only space agencies, and they might not love, you know, to change their mission according to planetary protection. So it's a very important topic. But for Europa right now, it's not really a problem because this is under COSPA rules and it is not touching the surface. Yes?
Actually, just continuing from that question, I was wondering from a policy point of view, do you think we should be considering banning any of the commercial activities for fear of contamination, or do you sort of believe that we just have to let things go and see where we end up?
No, it's a topic which is including sustainability, where planetary protection falls into the category, which is discussed at every astronomy conference right now. Even, for instance, look at the dark and quiet skies, because the satellites, you know, more or less hinder the astronomers to observe. So it's a really, really big topic. For the planetary protection, we have at the moment a committee in the Committee of Space Research, which works with the United Nations and has also the big companies like Blue Origin or so in that. But honestly, it's a big problem, and it is discussed in the United Nations in many different committees. We cannot force, there's no, it's not in the Outer Space Treaty, we have only soft laws in order to ask, kindly that the commercial actors, because they are still working with space agency, to adhere to rules. But we call it planetary environmental stewardship is a huge topic right now because the space sector exploded with missions. Yeah, and I'm just looking if I have this one mission. Yeah, this is the 185 missions. Yeah, and you can also destroy things on the moon, not only on Mars. Yeah, so honestly, this is a really important topic. I could give a whole lecture on that. Yeah. Yes.
If you think about the evolution of the Sun and the habitable zone,
Yeah.
would the planet Mars, for example, get into the habitable zone if the sun develops?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have. I forgot to say that the lifetime, of our sun is approximately 10 billion years. So we are now in the middle, yeah, more or less, yeah. And the more time there is, it will not affect us anymore, but the more time there is, it will get hotter and hotter. And it is absolutely possible that this affects, the rest of the solar system in the future. How exactly that's going to happen, we don't know. But there's a lot of water on the ice caps, so yes, there could be these ideas have been discussed.
So we may have an escape.
Huh?
We may have an escape.
Yeah, you just have to jump on a starship, and go to Mars and build, a big shield against galactic cosmic rays and nice quarters and so on. Yeah. Yes.
When it comes to the exoplanets, do we have any way to search for the biomarkers in the atmosphere?
To Venus?
No,
Exoplanets.
the exoplanets.
Exoplanets, yes. There are several instruments, also ground-based, where you can actually look at, for instance, methane or carbon dioxide or ozone or in the atmosphere, or they have been detected already. It's just like, it's not as easy as going to Mars, taking a sample or making an in situ measurement, because there are so many questions you have still about, an exoplanet and its environment and its relation to its host star. That you really have to piece that together with many different observations. But, and you will never be 100% sure, because look at our Earth. If you would have looked at our Earth 3.5 billion years ago, there was no oxygen, yeah, but it was inhabited, yeah, and it's difficult to say something concrete. There must be life. You could only give an estimate, I think. Yes?
Because we have the meteorites and we found a lot of organic material.
Yeah.
Do you believe that meteorites have played a very big role in the creation of life on planets?
Well, it's in the meteorites have just brought organic material and water, asteroid, comets, and meteorites to the young planets. And so, how they use that, we don't know. Yeah, this is something which there's a lot of discussions about what happens in craters. When they impact and how those molecules are actually used. It's just we have quite good estimates that there's a lot of material which came down, and we know with every mission which we have, we know more about, that there are really a lot of biological molecules, and it actually could have contributed to the raw material. There might be some regions on the Earth, like in the deep oceans, which also build raw material, but it's probably several sources which work together to build the first cells and first vesicles, you know, and then future protocells. Yes?
I was wondering whether these organic molecules or complex molecules can survive the entry into an atmosphere, which is a very violent process.
Yes, they do, because the meteorites, we know from the meteorites, we know, because we are collecting them. The best is, I told you, they can fall into your garden. Yeah, there are a special group of meteorites which are the carbonaceous meteorites. We call them carbon meteorites. They have a higher percentage of carbon and they have a lot of molecules. This is also, you know, also the asteroids which we are looking at are carbon asteroids. And we are collecting them mostly in the Antarctica because it's black and white. Yeah, and there are always campaigns where you collect all these kind of meteorites in Antarctica every year, and we are bringing them in the lab, and we find molecules there. We do isotopic measurements in order to prove that they are extraterrestrial. Yeah, and we know that they have survived. Yeah, of course. I mean, if you don't do isotopic measurements, it could be just from the hand and you touch it, you know. But we know that, and the samples which have been taken from asteroids, you know, they are in confinement. They are, you know, they are treated extremely without having no contamination, and we know that this is extraterrestrial material. Yeah, you are still looking skeptic.
Yeah, just take an amino acid and expose it to high temperatures as you get from a reaction
Absolutely.
process. It just breaks apart. So I wonder.
Totally. I published by myself a lot of papers about UV radiation on amino acids in ICIS and things like that. But they are really temperature, but they are really deeply buried, you know, and in the material which makes it through the Earth's atmosphere. It definitely can survive. We also find organic molecules on Mars, you know, which are very likely from meteoritic places. So, you know, when an asteroid or a meteorite comes in, the outer layers are things, but the interior stays cold, and it is protected by radiation. Yeah, UV radiation. Yeah, yeah.
Another question. There was a question about the risk of contamination, but you could also think about the chances of contamination. Would it be possible to transform the Venus atmosphere by contamination into something more habitable?
Well, this is called terraforming. Yeah. Mostly I have not heard it about Venus, because Venus is really a very difficult environment. When it's so hot, how do you cool it? But there are a lot of discussion about terraforming Mars. Yeah. And making, you know, some kind of a more comfortable atmosphere. Obviously, you have quite some kind of, I would say, different opinions in the society, because from the ethical point of view, you have a lot of resistance, you know, to do that. But it is discussed even more, not for Venus, but for Mars. It has been discussed, and you have seen The Martian and, you know, other movies. There are discussions, you know, about, but it is, I would say, financially right now, really out of reach at the moment. I could not imagine, yeah, that is what, but there are studies, that's absolutely clear, yeah.
Maybe we can have one last question.
I'm just wondering if you fast forward to a moment when we detect life outside.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, with all the research you've done over the last decades, what would it mean for you personally?
Okay, so I actually have a nice slide. I hope I find it. Not what it means to me personally, but this is also a nice slide. This is very short. You should have a look at it. Yeah? We are changing a lot of the Earth, and they are changing us. Yeah, and habitable does not mean inhabited. Sorry, I just think. But I have the code scale. I hope I can find it. Yeah, this is the call for framework for reporting evidence for life. Yeah, and you can actually download that paper. It's open access. You know, so. I think for scientists which are working with microbes and primitive life and organic molecules, we are completely, we can put it into the different boxes, how we are actually doing our research 20 years, but for the society at large, it's a really, really important problem. In particular now with social media, we're discussing that a lot, where all kinds of weird things could come on. So this is the cold scale, as it's called, for communicating the nature of results that may provide evidence for life. You can download that, and you have to be really sure. Yeah, it's not like you find we find amino acids now and in asteroids and so on. We might find it later on somewhere when we drill down in the Martian subsurface. On the surface, we don't think that they can survive because it's such a big radiation. But if we drill down in the subsurface of Mars, we might find biomarkers, and we have to be 100% sure what we say and how we say it. To society, because it could just go really wrong. So it's a really good question that you ask. For me personally, I would not be surprised to find organic molecules. I would not be surprised to find remnants of primitive life, depending on the context and the rocks. But how we actually communicate that to society at large, and how you actually take it, because you are interested, but there are also people which are not interested, and they could take it in a wrong way. You have to be really, really very careful. And there are measures, I cannot go through all that, but that we really only go with the information, into public when we've really done all the tests.
Thank you.